I have to tell you, like, I have this, and you guys will, make fun of me for this because you know how much I love the captain, but I just have this inherent faith that the weather will be okay because it's Derek Jeter's final game in the Bronx, and they'll find a way. Mother Nature's on his side, right? They will find a way. Bill Evans is telling you that in all likelihood they will find the pocket of time they need, and the weather won't be as bad as predicted, and they'll be able to play this game. I'm curious for people who have tickets, is there any hesitation? Are you going to be there no matter what? Because my guess is people are going to go. The weather isn't going to keep them away. They're going to be there regardless. So whether or not there's a delay or, they have to wait 3 hours and then it was canceled, I feel like everybody's still going to be there, that nobody is going to keep from actually going. But I'd be curious, and I know Andrew had asked this question earlier, I'd be curious, people who have tickets, what they are planning to do. If their plans are altered at all, if they're just like, no, I'm grabbing a poncho, I'm there. 1-800-919-3776, the telephone number on the Lexus of Route 10 hotline. Daniel in Queens. Daniel, you're on with Ryan Rucco. Hey, Daniel, you're on. Oh, you know what? Hey, Daniel has kids. That happens sometimes. I get it. Sometimes you got to tend to the children. Totally understand. Pat in Jersey. Pat, you're on the Lexus of Route 10 hotline.
Hey, how's it going? You guys have touched upon it, and I've heard other people on the show touch upon it. But one thing that hasn't really been said is that Derek Jeter's fame and greatness comes from he's a product of his time. Derek did wonderful things for the Yankees, New York, and above all, the fans. I'm 22. I don't remember a team without Jeter. Jeter is the Yankees. But
right.
What's great about him is what he did. But what's better about him, I hate to say it, but was what he didn't do. He didn't take shortcuts, and he didn't disregard his responsibility to New York City and his fans. He didn't do steroids. He stayed out of he was never, you ever see him negatively in the press? It's ridiculous. This guy is awesome because of what he didn't do, not also, as well as what he didn't.
You know what? Perfectly said. Bravo, my friend. And you're 100% right. And this is one thing I've been saying. Now, look, people always want to come up with some way to debate or intrigue or, if you're a talk show host, like that's kind of ingrained in you as your job or, if you're hosting a late-night sports TV show or whatever, that's your job. So you come up with stuff like that. I'm sorry. This is one of those situations where I'm not going to besmirch the man with debate. He doesn't deserve it. He deserves praise. He does, because of what you just said. Not just the way he played, but everything he didn't do, too. At a time when more dirty laundry is found out than ever before. We thought the camera phone, was going to be the game changer. It was, but it expanded so far beyond that. Because everyone has one. And yet, he's still clean. And who wouldn't want to catch Derek Jeter in the act of something scandalous? Nothing. The worst thing on this guy is that he was reported to have given gift baskets with autographs to his conquests, which, by the way, he addressed in the New York Magazine article that came out the other day and said was absolutely ridiculous. Who would do that? Which is exactly what I thought. I'm sure Derek Jeter's a smooth brother. I don't think he's tacky. Is he really giving autographs of himself? I mean, it's kind of boss, actually, I think. Like, hey, this is for you. Hope you had a good time. But, I mean, he's not that tacky. He wouldn't do that anyway. But the point is, you have nothing on him. And in a time when there is so much that we harp on negatively, are we not supposed to then spend ample time on the positive? See, to me, if you are a person who is clamoring for the firing of Roger Goodell and basking in the negativity of professional sports, and then you have a problem with the amount of time that Derek Jeter is celebrated, you're a total fraud, and you don't care about anything but yourself. That's how I look at you. Because you are sending completely different messages. You don't just scold for the negative. You praise for the positive. It's reinforcement. Yeah, you do good. This is what happens. Any athlete growing up, looking at the way Derek Jeter is being treated right now, knows that, my gosh, if I stay out of trouble, if I don't take shortcuts, if I do the right thing, and if I'm really good and I win, I can receive praise like that. That's pretty good. I kind of clamor for that. Right now we're having sort of a shift in the paradigm of sports where it's no longer okay to say, well, whatever he does off the field is fine. because he's great on the field. Look at Adrian Peterson. He's not playing right now. He's really good at football. But it's no longer okay to do what Adrian Peterson did and still play on the field. For a long time, the culture in this country for professional sports has been, I don't care what you do off the field as long as you can contribute on it. Like, yeah, he's a bad guy. Watch what happens in the NFL draft this year. There's going to be more scrutiny around the 2015 NFL draft class than ever in the history of professional sports in this country. Because all that baggage we used to just pay lip service to now is going to become the kind of red flags that scare teams from drafting players because they won't want to be associated with what these guys have been involved with off the field. That's right. It's going to be a totally unique experience. And at a time when that paradigm is shifting, it's probably also a good time to remember that Derek Jeter is a guy who we never had to worry about off the field, who we never had to worry about doing the right thing, being polite. I know a story of him secretly paying an entire college tuition for a student. I'm not going to say the student's name, I'm not going to say where, but that's the kind of guy he is, doing the right thing, trying to make a difference. And while he does it, also being the kind of athlete you want to celebrate just purely on his on-field performance. That's why I have no guilt, no hesitation in slobbering over his career today. People think that it affects me if they tweet, oh my gosh, man, why? No! Why? Because he deserves the praise. I'm not afraid of positive reinforcement. Andrew Gunling, that guy's a great producer. He is a great producer. He is going to do whatever he wants to do in this business. He's very funny on air. He could host his own show if he wanted to. He is terrific. No problem saying that. Why? Oh, stop it with Andrew. No, he deserves the praise. Jeff Candelmo, let me tell you something. Nobody cares more about a radio show than Jeff Candelmo does. Nobody puts more time into production than Jeff Candelmo does. He's quick. He knows sports. He comes up with good ideas. He's damn good at what he does. No problem saying that. He should be praised. What? We can only illustrate when somebody does something wrong? Sorry, that's not the world I live in, nor I want to. Derek Jeter deserves every bit of praise he gets and has gotten this year, today, and for the rest of time. And it's not going to stop on this show, not as long as I'm talking on the microphone. Because he is somebody worth celebrating. He has been the guy. He's the face of the era. There are a lot of contributors. Derek Jeter can't win a World Series by himself. No one, even his biggest fan like me, would ever say that he can. Bernie Williams, Jorge Posada, Paul O'Neill, Andy Pettitte, Mariano Rivera, Jeff Nelson, Graham Lloyd, Mike Stanton, Scott Brocious, Chad Curtis. All these guys played big roles in the Yankees championship years. Andy Fox got in on the mix. And, of course, those central guys, Bernie, Jorge, Andy, Mo, Derek, O'Neill, Tino. You can have a really healthy argument about who means most to their dynastic years. There is no argument about who is the face of the dynastic years. It's Derek Jeter. And that's why we all feel this so much. He's been the representation of one of the greatest eras of Yankees baseball that we've had. Now, they've had a lot of them. We understand that. But remember, they went through a down period between the 80s, after the 81 World Series appearance, until the mid-90s. And he was the face of the rejuvenation. We celebrate rings. He has 5 of them. We celebrate winning. This is the first game he will ever play at Yankee Stadium with his team eliminated. He also won the hearts of all the ladies. Remember when he was in 96? My sister grew up, every boyfriend she had and her husband now knew that, if Derek if he ever called me, I'm sorry, I'm going to leave because it's Derek Jeter. And, that was the policy for basically 1 million girls who grew up in our city and in the tri-state area. I suppose the tri-state doesn't have an era, but maybe it does. He connected to the fans that way, won the heart of all the ladies. He was the young guy. So we saw him, my generation, I'm 27, we feel like when Derek Jeter walks off the field, it's an official end to childhood. It doesn't mean I don't feel like a man in a lot of ways today. But if you want a sobering reality check, that's it. When the guy you watched play a game when you were a kid all of a sudden isn't playing it anymore. He represents all of that to all of us. And you tell me what the greatest strike against him is. Doesn't mean he's perfect, but he's done a pretty darn good job of representing himself exactly as you would hope for your star to do. There are no hesitations from parents when a kid says, "Can I get a Jeter jersey?" "Yeah, we'd love it if you did. It's a great person." Doesn't mean you know him all that well. But I think sometimes we forget how he sort of led us into his personality early on. Like, if you remember, one of the trademarks of Derek Jeter early on was him being on the on-deck circle, interacting with the kids behind him. Do you remember that? He would always be playing around, smiling, goofing off with kids while he was on the on-deck circle. That's something he did for years. And it was endearing, and it drew us to him. And then he'd come up with big hits and great over-the-shoulder catches, and he'd dive into the stands, and he'd pump his right fist and win World Series, and all of those things were pretty good supplemental reasons to be endeared to him as well. 1-800-919-3776, the telephone number on the Lexus of Route 10 hotline. All right, I want you guys to share your memories, what this day means to you. Sean in Maryland, go ahead, Sean.
Hello?
Yeah, Sean, you're on the radio, baby.
Hey, what's going on, Ryan? Long time. I haven't called in a while.
Well, we miss you, and I'm glad to have you back, dude.
Yeah, man, it's been a rough couple of weeks. He's all I've known playing second base. My dad took me to games when I was little, and this weekend I happened to be home in New York working, and I woke up Saturday and I was like, you know what, I'm going to take my boys to Yankee Stadium. And I was able to get some tickets, and we had a great day. They know who number 2 is. They know, all about Derek Jeter, and, he's just been awesome. I mean, I can't talk about it how many times he's just represented us as Yankees, as New Yorkers, and epitomizes what it is to be a success and just to be a straight-up stand-up type of guy, Not to mention all the good-looking women he's dated, but, he's been a role model in different ways, but he's just, a stand-up guy, and I'm telling you, I'm just going to miss him, He's just a good guy, real good guy.
And you know what I always liked about him, and thanks for the call, Sean, and look, I've had the opportunity to get to interact with him a lot. I've done several interviews with him. I've chatted with him in the Yankee clubhouse. I've been off-site at events with him. What I always appreciated about him was he was not phony at all. At all. He never made you feel like you were his best friend, because you're not. He made you feel respected. He was polite. He was funny and sarcastic. Just a normal guy around you who was not going to pretend like you were his best friend, to be phony, but also wasn't going to act like he was so above you. You know what he does when he meets you? He shakes your hand and says, "Hi, I'm Derek." Like, I don't know who you are. But he never wants to take for granted that you do. That's doing it right. Somebody who was raised right. His parents did their job. And he was always, for me, that was one thing I appreciated about him from a media perspective. Always professional, always polite, never tried to skirt responsibility. He's not making an error and then not showing up at his locker. He's not doing it. He's not striking out to end the game and then rushing off to a dinner without answering questions. He's not doing it. He knows he has to be there, and he will be there. John in Red Bank. John, you're on the Lexus of Route 10 hotline.
Hey, Ryan, first-time caller here.
Good to have you, John.
Thank you very much. I was calling to say, I keep hearing you say he should be celebrated as, the greatest player to ever be a New York player, but I think he should be celebrated
that's not what I said at all. But I said that he is as worthy of celebration as any athlete in the history of our city. I did not say he's the best. In fact, I even said that does not mean he's the best athlete in the history of our city. But if you're only going to celebrate ability, he has plenty of it, and it's worthy of celebration. But there are better athletes that we've had in our city. But if you're going to celebrate every other aspect of him, his likability, his accountability, his professionalism, the fact that during a time when more aspects of people's dirty laundry is infiltrated than ever before, we have none on him, The fact that he's a winner, if we're going to factor in all of those things, then yeah, you better believe he's as worthy a celebration as any athlete in the history of this city. You tell me who's a better combination of all of those things. Who? That doesn't mean we don't have some great choices. Of course we do. But he really covers all the bases. He's likable. He's responsible. He's a leader. And I love when people say, well, you know, he wasn't the kind of guy who would be vocal. To you, because you weren't the person he had to have the conversation with. Ask people who are in that clubhouse if he takes people aside and talks to them about things. I was hosting Mike and Mike yesterday. Joe Torre was talking about how he would have Derek do it for him. Jeter would pull guys aside for Torre, and he'd have those conversations because that's the respect he had instantly. Listen to the way his older teammates talk about him. Paul O'Neill, David Cone. I spent years around those guys in the Yankee booth. They could not have more respect for Derek Jeter because he also played every single day. We all know the guy who gets a cold and misses 3 days of work. It's hard to respect that guy. I'm not saying go to the office with the flu and infect your whole company. But the person who plays through the nicks and knacks, who wants to be there, who you can rely on, your reliability is a big thing. If I know you're going to be here every single day, that means a lot. If I know what to expect, that means a lot. Isn't it the greatest thing in the world to give a task to someone and just know it's going to get done? Well, it's pretty great to know the shortstop's going to play 160 games, hit 300, and give you 200 hits for 20 years. That's pretty solid reliability.
The chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup is upon us.
The Challenger Round.
There's a new format, 16 drivers, 3 races, 12 will advance.
They're going to have to find their groove on every track.
This is like no other playoff in racing.
Brad and Joey are leading the chase charge. This is it. 4 drivers will be eliminated after Dover.
The final race in the Challenger Round. 16 nations battle, 12 advance in the chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup. For 4, it's over at Dover. Sunday at 1 Eastern on ESPN. Presented by Pennzoil.
Boog, is this one of these games, one of these moments where, you know, in the midst of your crazy travel schedule and calling so many games, you're saying, whoa, I'm going to call Derek Jeter's last game at Yankee Stadium?
Yeah, it'll be cool. I mean, there's, you know, someone that grew up in New York and, you know, has an appreciation for his career, what it means to the city, to that organization. It's special to get a chance to see it for the last time. And I definitely have some curiosity to see how he'll react and what the night will be like. So, Boog, when you think about Jeter, you've been around baseball for a long time now. What comes to mind for you? I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that he's probably one of the 3 best shortstops ever. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I have a tendency to kind of, you know, rail against the narratives that get created. I think that he's been the beneficiary in the greater picture of some narratives that have probably boosted him in a way that he may not have deserved. And yet, he's still one of the best players in the history of the organization. I think that what ended up happening was the narrative got created in terms of the postseason and him delivering so many times that we got to a place. And David Ortiz is probably a similar example. We don't remember the failures anymore. You know, it's like you get to a place where the narrative gets created and, like, yeah, nobody remembers the jumpers that Jordan missed at the end of the game. So right. I think that at times the narrative got a little out of hand in terms of the intangibles that he brought to the table, but there's no denying that, you know, at least in my opinion, that those were there. He's been an amazing player to watch. It's pretty neat that you get a chance to watch one of the best shortstops over the course of 20 years. And you're talking with John Sciambi. You'll have the call on ESPN Radio tonight. You'll be able to listen on ESPNRadio.com. The other thing, John, I don't know if you've done games with a lot of people who've been in a lot of clubhouses. I do feel like it's hard to find those players who are just universally respected by all of their peers. Like, you don't really hear, because even guys who say stuff on the record, maybe they just take a little shot. He does seem to be, and Mo was that way last year too, one of those few guys who by his peers is universally respected and looked up to as well. Has that been your experience also? Yeah, Mo would be, above all. You never, on the record, off the record, privately, having fun, a single bad word uttered about that guy. And Jeter would be pretty close when it comes to opposing clubhouses, his own clubhouse. I mean, I would concur. It's pretty unique that you don't have someone off in some corner, spewing some haterade, or at least having some envy, some jealousy, whatever. But he is for sure respected as, the guy that everybody admired and respected.
So, when you look at this Yankee team moving forward, Boog, is there a player that you can attach to? I mean, is there a face, or are we looking at some dark times ahead for this franchise?
All right, so maybe this is, I should probably know better than to say this. I can't foresee a scenario where next year they would be a legit favorite to make a playoff. I think that I cannot envision a scenario how that were to happen. I mean, it's just you're talking about an aging team that's difficult to keep on the field. One of the things when you look at the guys that were healthiest this year, they were some of their oldest players. When you consider that Ichiro, Jeter, and Kuroda were three guys that were pretty much able to be out there for the entire season, and that's sort of unique, but. I think that they're in a bit of a tough spot, married to a lot of these contracts with guys that are past peak, and there's still a lot of money owed. I think they're in a difficult position.
Good stuff, Boog. Enjoy the call tonight. Hopefully the rain stays away, and you get to call this historic moment. We'll be listening.
All right, thanks, Ben.
The chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup is upon us.
The Challenger Round.
There's a new format, 16 drivers, 3 races, 12 will advance.
They're going to have to find their groove on every track.
This is like no other playoff in racing.
Brad and Joey are leading the chase charge. This is it. 4 drivers will be eliminated after Dover.
The final race in the Challenger Round. 16 nations battle, 12 advance in the chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup. For 4, it's over at Dover. Sunday at 1 Eastern on ESPN. Presented by Pennzoil.
This is ESPN New York's Fantasy.
You play to win the game.
Football.
I want winners.
Primer.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Well, Matthew Berry understands fantasy football. Maybe not the words coming out of Chris Tucker's mouth, but he joins us now on the Lexus of Route 10 Celebrity Hotline. All right, Matthew, I want to go Jets with you for a second. If Eric Decker is not playing, what does that do for Jeremy Curley's fantasy value?
I think it helps it. You saw last week, right? 7 for 81 in the score. I watched that game very closely. Gino kept looking for Curley. He was the first option. It's a nice pass catcher. I don't think the matchup is particularly good. Detroit, believe it or not, 3rd in the NFL in pass defense, top 5 in terms of fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers. They're tied for 2nd in terms of lowest scoring. Like, that's a real defense. Like, I think the front 7 of the Lions are going to get a lot of pressure on Gino, so it's tough with 6 teams on a bye, but I'm probably looking elsewhere than the Jets wide receivers this week in fantasy.
What do you do with Carolina's running back situation right now?
Do you have to do anything with them?
How about a deeper league? Who can you pick up outside of D'Angelo?
I don't think there's anyone worth picking up outside of D'Angelo. It's a bunch of practice squad guys. Like, D'Angelo, for me, is on flex consideration. Look, Cam Newton's not running nearly as much. D'Angelo will get all the work with Tolbert and Stewart out. Not a great matchup with Baltimore, also a top 10 run defense, top 12 in terms of fewest points allowed to opposing fantasy quarterbacks, running backs, But I think with 6 teams on a bye, I currently have D'Angelo Williams in the 25 to 30 range.
How about the 2 rookie quarterbacks, Matthew? Bridgewater and Bortles now take over the starting reins. We know Matt Castle done for the year. And, let's just assume that Henny's done in Jacksonville and it's going to be Bortles' job. I'm in a 2-quarterback league myself. Are those guys you think you could be starting in 2-quarterback leagues?
Yeah, I do. I prefer Bridgewater to Bortles. But I like both guys, both this week and for the future. First off, with Bridgewater, you saw the 27 yards rushing last week. He's an athletic quarterback. I feel like he'll get you some rushing yards. Even though there's no Adrian Peterson, even though there's no Kyle Rudolph, there's still some playmakers on that team. and they'll have to lean on Bridgewater even more. So whether it's Patterson, whether it's Jennings, I believe, especially given Atlanta and their struggles so far this year on defense, I think Bridgewater is the better play this week and probably for the near future. Bortles, I think, was impressive. Bortles is probably the better player than Bridgewater, but has less talent around him. That said, Jacksonville isn't devoid of talent. We've seen like Allen Robinson, Alan Burns, Cecil Shorts when he's healthy step up. So there's some nice receivers there. I think you'll see a lot of junk time second half scoring for Bortles. So definitely in a 2-quarterback league, in a deeper league, both guys should be owned.
Is there an underperforming player right now who you think is worth grabbing via trade?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of guys, like the big-name guys. So Eddie Lacy, I'm a believer in Eddie Lacy. I'm a believer in Matt Forte. I'm not worried about either of those two big guys at all. Like, I literally just in a trade, just today, this morning actually got a trade for Eddie Lacy, which I'm very happy about. So I think those are two guys that I would buy low on in a big way. I'm not concerned about their slow starts.
Matthew, I got one more for you. It's a specific one to my team.
Okay.
Is Sammy Watkins? I'm in my 2-quarterback league. I have 3 wideouts and a flex as well, PPR league. Do you think Sammy Watkins will ever emerge as somebody who you feel comfortable starting as a 3rd wideout on a team?
In a league of that size, 12-team, 3 wide receivers, yes. I do believe so. Look, E.J. Manuel needs to get better. We know this. But he's so target heavy as it is. I mean, he's already getting almost 40% of the team's targets in his 3rd game as a rookie. Manuel will get better. That is a team that will have to throw the ball. So I believe Sammy Watkins will be in his position to start for you at some point.
Thank you, Matthew.
Sooner than later.
Ooh, I like that. Great stuff as always, Matthew. Thank you for the information.
You bet.
All right, that is Matthew Berry with his fantasy football primer.
The chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup is upon us.
The Challenger Round.
There's a new format, 16 drivers, 3 races, 12 will advance.
They're going to have to find their groove on every track.
This is like no other playoff in racing.
Brad and Joey are leading the chase charge. This is it. 4 drivers will be eliminated after Dover.
The final race in the Challenger Round. 16 nations battle, 12 advance in the chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup. For 4, it's over at Dover. Sunday at 1 Eastern on ESPN. Presented by Pennzoil.
Behind enemy lines.
Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
Washington Redskins.
Yes, indeed. Right now, we check in with John Keim. Does a good job covering the Redskins for ESPN. All right, John, fill us in on the injuries to this team, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. Who is out tonight for Washington?
Well, how much time do we have here to go over all that? Well, I think everybody should know that D'Angelo Hall is out. He's out for the year with the Achilles tear. The question really is, I don't know that a lot of guys will miss, but a lot of guys are banged up. They have 4 of their 6 defensive linemen are on the injury report listed as questionable, including nose tackle Chris Baker and defensive end Jason Hatcher. Both obviously are very pivotal to what they do up front, very strong, and Hatcher provides the interior pass rush in their big nickel and their fast nickel alignment. So very crucial there. I would expect them to go. The question with Hatcher is how will he be able to go the whole game? So those are really the key injuries there. They have a lot of guys banged up on both sides, but again, Hall's out. That puts rookie Bashaud Breeland starting at corner opposite David Amerson. So they're losing a lot of veteran experience, putting in a guy who's looked good, has looked good in the backup role.
I'm talking with John Keim, covers the Redskins for ESPN. How about Kirk Cousins, John? I know he got off to a great start last game. Some people weren't thrilled with the way he finished. How sold on him are you?
Well, I'm sold that I think he can do well in this offense, but I need to see more just because there's been a very distinct difference between his first half and second half of games, and this goes back to last year as well. His passer rating in the second half of his last 5 games is around 60. So, what I wonder with him is this an experience thing, or is he somebody that's, he's a guy who over-prepares, and which is a good thing, and I think that bodes well for the first half of games, and then things that get adjusted in halftime. Is it something that is that part of the growing experience for him? Does he get, if he's not as prepared in the second half because there's adjustments going on, does he fail to adjust accordingly? I don't know. I think I'm curious to see how that develops. But I do like when he's on in the first half, you'll see he gets rid of the ball on time, good rhythm to the passing game, and gives guys and knows where to find the playmakers, does a good job in the pocket. But in the second half, even last week, you saw a guy who was a little bit more jittery in the pocket, not stepping into his throws as much, feeling the pressure a little bit more than he did in the first half.
Good stuff, John. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
The chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup is upon us.
The Challenger Round.
There's a new format, 16 drivers, 3 races, 12 will advance.
They're going to have to find their groove on every track.
This is like no other playoff in racing.
Brad and Joey are leading the chase charge. This is it. 4 drivers will be eliminated after Dover.
The final race in the Challenger Round. 16 nations battle, 12 advance in the chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup. For 4, it's over at Dover. Sunday at 1 Eastern on ESPN. Presented by Pennzoil.
Your home for the Major League Baseball playoff.
If you are looking for a debate about whether or not Derek Jeter is overrated, you've come to the wrong place. It saddens me sometimes that we feel the need to turn every sports moment into a debate. 95% of my business, that's what it is. Those things evolve naturally. They just happen when you're talking sports. But they don't need to happen 100% of the time. And I don't think that's what this day is. You see, this day is a day where we celebrate a player who is as worthy of celebration as any athlete in the history of our city. And I'm not hyperbolizing. And that doesn't mean he's the best athlete in the history of our city. That means he is as worthy of celebration as any athlete in the history of our city. Think about his ability alone. He's one of the 2 or 3 greatest shortstops in the history of baseball. One of the most prodigious positions, and he is one of the top 2 or 3 ever. If you read Jason Stark's piece on ESPN.com, you know that even as some were trying to knock him down statistically, if you want to go to the numbers, Jeter gets by just fine. Whether you're looking at his on-base percentage, which is 30 points higher than any shortstop in the post-war era who played anywhere near as long as him, or you want to look at his seasons of 200 hits, his consecutive seasons of at least 150, his lifetime batting average of .310, the fact that he's the all-time leader in a gazillion major categories for the most decorated franchise in the history of professional sports, the numbers alone are worthy of great celebration. But they wouldn't make Derek Jeter the most worthy in the history of our city. But it's everything else that's gone along with it. You see, you work from a base of incredible tangibles, amazing ability, historic accomplishments, and then you add to it that he has won championships, been the author of some of the most memorable moments we have ever had in baseball, and more specifically to us, in Yankees history, in this city's history. And there are a lot of moments for that franchise, and there are a lot of moments for this city. But Derek Jeter is at the heart of quite a few of them. Whether it's the flip, or his walk-off in 01, or the dive into the stands, or his first game against Cleveland, where he goes about 70 feet, maybe 130 feet, into the outfield to make an over-the-shoulder catch and homers in his first start in 96. One moment I always forget about, and I wanted to make sure I remembered, Derek Jeter, he almost won the Yankees the ALCS in 04 with that triple off of Pedro late in Game 4. He triples in 3 runs, gives the Yankees a 4-2 lead. In Game 5, that was. And Tom Gordon pukes it away, and we all know what happens from there. But you know what Derek Jeter did that night? Something he did so often. He swam upstream. He went against the grain. He was not the guy who, when everybody else wasn't hitting, was going to fall in line and not hit to. He was always the guy who would do what was required at that moment, especially when no one else was. And I think about the little times when he did that. I think about 2006 when the Yankees are down 2-1 to the Tigers in the ALDS, and Jeter's leading off Game 4, and I say, you know what? I know he's going to lead off with a hit, and he doubles. Or I think about when the Yankees are facing elimination against the Angels in 2005, and it's the 9th inning, and Jeter's up, and I go, I know he's going to start a rally, and he does, only to have A-Rod bang into a double play and eliminate him from the bases. That's what Jeter did. There are some guys who just sort of fall with the tide, who go with the waves. He was a guy who was always able to give them that moment they needed when no one else was ready to. And we think about the most celebrated ones, the ones like I mentioned, the walk-off in 2001 and the flip. But there's a lot of other subtle ones that help bring the Yankees to those championships, to bring us those moments. Even think about 2009. Remember, in 2009, the Yankees hadn't won a first-round series in 5 years. And there was drama, even against the Twins, wondering how they would handle. And they were down 2-0 in Game 1. And the place was tense. I was there. And you know what changed it? Derek Jeter whipping a 2-run homer to left field. Exhale. Move on. Eventually, number 27. That's what number 2 always brought. And on this day, he's as worthy of celebration as any athlete in the history of our city, not just because of all those moments, but because of the way he did it. You know, we have gone from being unable to have privacy to devaluing it as a society. And Derek Jeter manages to still value it and keep it at a time when his attention is more sought after than anybody's. That's something to aspire to. That's something to celebrate. Somebody who gets it, who's always gotten it, and who any parent could have pointed to and said, yeah, you know what, I'm okay with my kid using him as a role model. There's value in that. If we're going to spend the amount of time we do tearing down those that make mistakes, I'm not going to have a problem with us celebrating those who do it the right way. And nobody has done it better for us in the public eye than this guy, while winning and while playing his sport just about as well as anybody ever has in the history of the game at his position.
The chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup is upon us.
The Challenger Round.
There's a new format, 16 drivers, 3 races, 12 will advance.
They're going to have to find their groove on every track.
This is like no other playoff in racing.
Brad and Joey are leading the chase charge. This is it. 4 drivers will be eliminated after Dover.
The final race in the Challenger Round. 16 nations battle, 12 advance in the chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup. For 4, it's over at Dover. Sunday at 1 Eastern on ESPN. Presented by Pennzoil.